Good evening, and welcome to our TV show featuring documentaries revealing the realities behind myths using research and scholarship. I'm your host, Ergün Kırlıkovalı, and I will be with you every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to send me your feedback on our website, mythsandrealities.com. Repeat, mythsandrealities.com, or at #ethocide. In episode 16, we have learned that the issue of Armenian demands for reparations has been around for a century. Many Armenians still dream of a restoration of the Turkish-Armenian border as drawn by former U.S. President Woodrow Wilson in the 1920 Treaty of Sèvres. After the signing of the stillborn and never-ratified treaty on August 10, 1920, the Armenian army immediately attacked Kars and surroundings, only to be defeated decisively by Kazim Karabekir's Third Ottoman Army. With the signing of the Treaty of Gumru, or Alexandropol, on December 3, 1920, Turkey took back the former Ottoman lands ceded to Armenia in the Treaty of Sèvres. The treaty stipulated that Armenia cede to Turkey its entire province of Kars, except a new border between the two countries, and renounce the Treaty of Sèvres. The Treaty of Gumru was further ratified by the Treaty of Moscow, signed between the Soviet Russia and Turkey on 16th of March 1921, and ratified again by the Treaty of Kars, signed on 13th of October 1921 by Turkey and the three new Soviet republics of Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. These international agreements, all signed back-to-back within a matter of 10 months, clearly validate each other. Their legitimacy are sound, as they are based on international law. All this closes the door on Armenia, whose irredentist policy is enshrined in Armenia's constitution, in the reference to Eastern Turkey as, quote, Western Armenia, unquote. This hostile phrase remains a permanent obstacle to peace between Turkey and Armenia today. While the Republic of Armenia is prevented from coveting neighbors' territories, the Armenian Diaspora feels that no legal obstacles prevent individuals and groups from seeking monetary reparations. But they too are sadly mistaken. The Armenian Diaspora seem to have pinned their hopes on the irrational interpretations of law by a philosophy major, Dr. Henry C. Thirold, from the University of Massachusetts, who deludes the Armenian lobby with absurd comments like this one. I quote, "Some of the Treaty of Sèvres elements retain the force of law, and the treaty itself is not superseded by the 1923 Treaty of Lausanne," unquote. The Armenian lobby in America has aggressively promoted a dishonest and racist view of history while agitating for federal and state proclamations or resolutions distorting the events of 1915 as genocide. California Senate Bill SB 1915, introduced by two Armenian senators, Puchigian and Spire, passed in the year 2000. It enabled the Armenian descendants of the 1915 events to file claims against insurance companies a century later, seeking payments from policies in effect between 1875 and 1923. This self-serving law was struck down by a 2009 verdict by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit for being unconstitutional, as it usurped the federal government's foreign affairs powers. The lawsuit Bakalyan Davoyan versus Central Bank of Turkey, based on this law, was dismissed. And a 2012 verdict by the same court threw out another lawsuit also related to the alleged genocide. The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals dismissed it in its 11-0 unanimous ruling, the lawsuit Movsesian versus Victoria Versigaron. The court ruled that only the federal government has jurisdiction over foreign entities and that the U.S. government's foreign policy was based on non-recognition of genocide. When asked at a recent interview what the Armenians will do after President Biden's genocide recognition, an Armenian community leader responded, I quote, "The entire arena is now open to us. So there is the legal avenue, and I think that will be pursued very meaningfully," unquote. And in a long editorial titled Entering the Reparations Phase, Who is Leading?, published at Armenian Weekly, another Armenian community leader opined, I quote, "An international reparations study group with participants from the Armenian government and diaspora should be created using the 2015 report led by Dr. Thirold as a guide," unquote. There are many editorials, letters, and comments that all point to the direction of filing more lawsuits against Turkey. Now that President Biden uttered the word G word, the Armenian diaspora will probably reintroduce their previously rejected lawsuits against Turkey. More anti-Turkish resolutions may be introduced at city, state, and federal legislatures, trying to hurt Turkish economy and Turkish people by meddling with the U.S.-Turkey relations. The Armenian lobby has been involved in boycott, divestment, and sanctions targeting Turkey. Such BDS activity is expected to surge. The Armenian diaspora will probably turn up its hate speech on all Turkish Americans. Increase in harassment cases and Armenian violence towards Turks and Azerbaijanis are to be expected. Armenians today still believe that they have legitimate claims to receive reparation from Turkey. What they do not know is that the claims of the naturalized American citizens of Ottoman Armenian origin are rendered baseless by the 1934 Turkish American Agreement. At this point, please allow me to introduce Roger R. Trask, born in 1930, died in 2008, a PhD from Penn State in US on diplomatic history. He wrote the book titled The United States Response to Turkish Nationalism and Reform, 1914-1939, published by the University of Minnesota in 1971. This book surveys the history of Turkish-American relations from the beginning of World War I to the beginning of World War II. The book focuses not only on formal diplomacy, but also on political, economic, social, cultural, philanthropic, and other important aspects. That separates this book from those hatchet jobs of books written by deceitful Armenian lobbyists and their dishonest and racist friends at the International Association of Genocide Scholars. Intimate knowledge of what transpired during what some call the isolation period for the U.S. is central to the understanding of the Turkish-American relations after World War II. Historians mostly ignored the history of the Turkish-American relations until the Cold War revealed geostrategic significance of the Republic of Turkey, which became the bulwark of Western Defense Alliance, a resourceful and reliable member of NATO, and a key country in the center of the region, surrounded by the Balkans, the Soviet Union, the Caucasus, the Middle East, North Africa, and East Mediterranean. This is where all the monotheist religions and most of the civilizations were born. This is where oil and gas resources are found. This is where historic trade and migration routes crisscross. Trask studied mutual diplomatic notes of the period intensively. He realized that the claims issue was the most important unresolved diplomatic issue between Turkey and the US in 1933. Most of the claims were from the 1914-1922 period during World War I and the subsequent Greek invasion of Asia Minor. The Turkish and American delegates discussed the issue during the Lausanne Conference in 1923, but no settlement was reached. After an exchange of notes on December 24, 1923, it was agreed to have a mixed claims commission meet within 6 months of the ratification of the Lausanne Treaty. But due to the rejection by the US Senate of the Lausanne Treaty, this work has come to a halt. It was not until August 15, 1933 that the first meeting of the Mixed Claims Commission took place at Istanbul. There were disagreements on the nature and amounts of claims. Turkey made it clear that only the claims of those with uncontested American nationality at the time of claims could be considered legitimate. After hard negotiations for a year, an agreement was finally reached on September 28, 1934. Turkey agreed to pay $100,000 per year for 13 years towards a grand total of $1.3 million with no interest. The US accepted this solution. Actual agreement was signed on October 25, 1934. Article 2 of the agreement was very important. Quote, "The two governments agree that by the payment of the aforementioned sum, Turkey will be released from liability with respect to all of the claims and further agree that every claim embraced by the agreement of December 24, 1923 shall be considered and treated as finally settled." The US government had to decide which of the claims would be honored and which disallowed. Fred K. Nielsen, after congressional authorization of March 22, 1935, established an office in Washington to do this. Nielsen's final report in 1937 allowed 33 claims and eliminated the rest as they had no supporting evidence and they were falsified or fraudulent. There were little dissent in the US against the terms of the claims agreement or the Nielsen awards, which provided for the expenditure of about $400,000 less than the total amount due from the Turks. The US informed, to the delight of Turkey, that this amount would be deducted from Turkey's payments. The settlement of the claims removed the most serious controversy existing between the US and Turkey. The Republic of Turkey proved its good faith in agreeing to a settlement involving an amount of money which appeared large to Turkey in view of its poor financial condition in the 1930s. In negotiations, both sides exhibited a spirit of compromise. The claims agreement of October 25, 1934, and the subsequent reduction in principle by the US testified to the success of the art of diplomacy in both countries as a means of bringing Turkey and the US closer together. These accounts are corroborated by the study of the historian Kemal Çiçek, PhD from the University of Birmingham, England, titled The 1934-1935 Turkish-American Compensation Agreement and Its Implications for Today, published in Review of Armenian Studies, number 23, in 2011. Çiçek determines that, I quote, "the claims of the naturalized American citizens of Ottoman Armenian origin are rather legally ungrounded in the light of the 1934-1935 Turkish American Agreement. Having studied the details of the talks and evaluated contents of all the files submitted to the State Department for compensation, the author concludes that Turkey agreed to pay $1.3 million for compensation in 13 equal installments. This figure alone shows that Armenian claims were found rather exaggerated by the U.S. State Department. Moreover, the fact that the State Department asked the Turkish government not to continue the payment after the 9th installment demonstrates that eligible Armenian claimants were indeed quite a few. Although the claims for damages were one of the most important issues between Turkey and the U.S. until 1933, it is curious that the issue has not been addressed in books covering the relations between Turkey and the U.S. and has even been treated as if it never existed until a doctoral dissertation published last year. Číček asserts that one of the other most important issues discussed during the First World War in relation to the relocation of Armenians was envali metrike, which means abandoned property, meaning the assets of the relocated Armenians which they left behind. It is known that various statutes have been adopted during the relocation of the Armenians, which made regulations concerning the properties, assets, and debts left behind and their liquidation. The most significant of these regulations are the ones made on May 30th and June 10th, 1915. With these statutes, putting under government protection the properties, assets, and abandoned lands of the relocated Armenians was demanded. Section 2 of the regulations, dated 30th of May 1915, consisting of 15 articles, states that, quote, the displaced Armenians could take all their belongings and livestock together with them, unquote. On the other hand, the statute of June 10th, 1915, consisting of 34 articles, which contains the essential regulations regarding the properties left behind, puts forth in detail how the properties and assets belonging to the relocated Armenians will be taken under protection and based on which principles they will be liquidated. One of the most noteworthy articles of this is the third one. In this article, the type, quantity, value, and names of the owners of the properties taken under protection are to be registered in detail. They will be transferred to suitable places of storage, such as churches, schools, and inns, in such a way that their ownership is distinct, laid out separately, and with care shown for their protection. More importantly, it indicates that the original of the records showing the amount, value, owners, and the places of safe custody of the properties will be given to the local administration, while a copy will be issued to the envali metrike, the Abandoned Properties Commission. In Article 5 of the same regulation, it has been expressed that with fragile items and animals among the properties to be moved, these will be sold by auction, by a board of designated by the Commission, with the equivalent in value being deposited in property safety boxes, under name in those cases in which the owners are known, and under those of the village or small town for cases in which they are not known. In Article 22, related to the assessment of the revenues obtained as a result of liquidations, it is demanded that some amounts collected from the sale or the rent are to be deposited in safety boxes in the name of the owners and are to be paid to them after appropriate application has been made. All of these implementations have aroused hopes among the displaced individuals in receiving compensation for their properties. Thus, it is understood that the government carried out sincere efforts to return the properties and assets of the Armenians who had returned to their territories at the end of the war. Articles 3, 10, and 11 of the decrees adopted on December 18, 1918, concerning the return of the displaced Armenians wanting to come back, clarifies the issue of returning of properties, assets, and other fragile goods. In Article 3, it is clearly stated that the immovable properties will be handed over to those who will return. Article 10 of the same decree indicates that the properties devolved to the Treasury must be returned with the approval of District Revenue Officer. The most important matter regarding the process of returning was the homes and lands assigned to the immigrants. However, the decree has made it compulsory that even the properties sold to the Muslim immigrants would be returned upon the claim of the real owner. Although some difficulties were encountered during the restoration of the properties and assets assigned to Muslim refugees, recent studies have clearly suggested that the government persistently returned the goods to their original owners. Due to the lack of studies, it has not been fully determined how many people benefited from the process of returning. Those who left the country without permission would not be allowed to benefit from the law about returning of the properties and assets. The liquidation of the assets left behind by Ottoman Armenians who had fled to the Caucasus was attempted to be resolved through the Treaty of Gumru on December 3, 1920. With Article 6 of the Treaty of Gumru, those Armenians who did not enter an armed struggle against the Ottoman state or who did not participate in the atrocities were permitted to return to their homes and benefit from the rights of minorities. Article 7 of the same treaty stipulates that within a year of the ratification of the treaty, those who did not return to their homes would lose their right. However, this treaty could not be implemented due to the disposition of the Dashnak Sutyun and the Republic of Armenia by the Soviet Union. Then the issue of the liquidation of the abandoned Armenian properties was tried to be resolved through the Treaty of Kars, which was signed on October 13, 1921. With the Article 14 of the treaty, the parties decided to conclude an agreement concerning refugees within 6 months. But even if this agreement had ever been concluded, it has not come to light. Reviewing the discussions of the Assembly, it can be understood that a period until March 1922 has been set for the Armenians to return to their homes. On the other hand, the Armenians returned to the southeastern part of Turkey and possessed their properties, completely left the country upon the withdrawal of the French from the region, probably fearing retaliation by the Muslims whom Armenians tortured and killed previously. When the abandoned properties and assets of the Armenians became the subject of arbitrary confiscation, the government felt it necessary to end this practice. On April 20, 1922, the Turkish Grand National Assembly adopted a law entitled Law on the administration of movable and immovable properties of the community who fled or remained absent. Selling of the abandoned properties with an auction and its price being deposited in the subdivision of treasury was made into a law. If the Armenians would return, the amount would be paid to them. Millions of Muslim refugees had also fled and abandoned their properties in the Balkans and the Caucasus. But none of the Balkan or Caucasus countries had introduced a similar law for the restitution of their properties. Therefore, some deputies had supported the confiscation of the abandoned properties and assets. Against this backdrop, we can now much better appreciate the 1934 Turkey-US agreement and its successful conclusion. Having studied the details of the negotiations and evaluated the contents of all files submitted to the State Department for compensation, Dr. Kemal Çiçek was able to ascertain that Turkey agreed to pay in 13 installments a total of 1.3 million for compensation as previously stipulated. This figure alone shows that Armenian claims were found by the State Department to be grossly exaggerated. And also the fact that the US Department, State Department, asked Turkish government not to continue the payment after the 9th installment also shows that the claimants were indeed quite a few, and some of the claims were exaggerated or even falsified. This agreement is in full force and effect today. An Armenian diaspora will hit this legal wall sooner or later. Will the Armenian diaspora finally realize the enormous legal obstacles in their way and give up their futile efforts to seek reparations? Or will they make a few Armenian lawyers rich anyway? Will they seek dialogue or revenge? Will they find peace or more conflict? These are all great questions for another time. Thank you for joining me today. See you next week.